Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are back with another episode of Daily Palantir Sunday edition. We have not done a Sunday episode of Daily Palantir in a while. And so on Sundays, really, we're not going through a ton of different stories and looking at the stock or anything like that. We're usually talking about one subject. And the reason I've been compelled to make this episode today on Sunday is because of something I found out about yesterday. And I was like, you know what? This is definitely something interesting. I think we should take a look at it. I'm sure people don't even know about this because the news broke on Twitter. And if you're not on Twitter, you probably didn't know that this even happened. But this did happen, and it's kind of funny, and it's kind of hilarious. So what am I talking about? What is this episode about? Well, folks, Russia has decided they are sanctioning Dr. Alex Karp, CEO of Palantir. So shout out to Iliano for tweeting this, who works at Palantir. I'll leave his Twitter in the description. You guys probably know him because you've seen him on my channel. But he said, congratulations to Dr. Karp for being sanctioned by the Russian government, a tribute to his work at Palantir and lifelong commitment for defending freedom and democracy. Honored to have such an esteemed leader. This is from the Russian government website. They put out a foreign ministry statement regarding personnel sanctions on a number of U.S. citizens. And there you go, Alex Karp, co-founder and CEO of Palantir Technologies. Now, I thought this was hilarious. And the reason I thought this was hilarious is because, it's kind of cool that Karp got sanctioned by the Russian government because Palantir is very prideful of the fact that they don't work with countries or nations that have Western values not at their core. They don't work with countries that essentially want to take over sovereign states like what Russia is doing in the Ukraine. Obviously, Palantir has played a major role in helping Ukraine. We talked about that this week in one of the Daily Palantir episodes in terms of a new article that came out with software targeting. We're going to listen to Karp in a second talk about Russia to get his perspective even deeper on Russia. Basically, Russia put out this statement on Friday and they sanctioned a bunch of different people that work at a bunch of defense tech companies. I thought it was interesting that they singled out Alex Karp with the idea that, hey, this guy cannot come to Russia. If he comes to Russia, he's a national security threat. And I think Karp feels pretty proud of that because along with other people that the Russian government decided to sanction, Karp was one of the esteemed people that has been so vocally anti-Russia, not only in his actions, but also in his words. You know, the things that the Russian government and the Chinese government want to control how you speak, which is your words, your thoughts, your ideas, that he ends up getting on this list and getting sanctioned by the entire government. So we're going to look at a couple clips of Karp talking about Russia and what has happened with Russia and the Ukraine-Russia war. Here's a first 30-second clip posted by John, shout out to them on Twitter, about if Palantir is effective and what he has to say to the short sellers in June of 2023 that were against Palantir.
By the way, my real answer to the short people is ask the Russians.
What do you mean by that?
It's like, we can't say, ask the Ukrainians, ask people who are on the battlefield, ask people who have been subject to...
You're talking about the effectiveness of your...
effectiveness of our product.
Okay.
So it's like, there's very little we can say. You can read what the Ukrainians are saying they use. Targeting, according to reports, has gone up, given the use of AI by products, potentially ours, from by 20 to 50x. These products have changed the course of history. And they will continue to change the course of history, and I'm super proud of that.
So again, Karp is very unapologetic. Ask the Russians. He's implying, hey, the reason the Russian government probably doesn't like me is because if you ask them, they realize that targeting is becoming more effective from Ukraine because of the fact that, Palantir software is actually effective. Here's Karp again on what has happened in Ukraine and Russia and what their software is doing.
Really slay the giant, and I know the Russians just underestimated the power of kinetic plus software plus heroism. And then I believe it's a zero-sum game in Russia, and there is no ability for Putin to lose. He can't just fail at war and then retire, which is what we're used to in democracy. You know, politicians fail and then we have another politician. And so the reason why I was sounding the alarm at Davos, and then again when we talked, to much derision, was simply this combination of American software, the way we build software, plus a kind of heroism that is very unusual, would outperform the giant of spend. And that leads to just this jarring reaction. And we don't want to believe in the West that people would be zero-sum. We're not that zero-sum in the West.
So basically, he's been backed into a corner. He's a caged animal. He will do crazy things that we
You're
can't.
backed into a corner where the corner is, if you fail, you'll be killed. Your friends will be killed. Your family will lose their assets.
So how do you then handicap what his options are?
Well,
and what the real possibility of him using nuclear weapons
what I
would be?
believe we should do is continue to support Ukraine and begin to engage in a dialogue where we figure out what it looks like for him to fail without having to say at home he failed. Now,
so what does that look like to you?
Well, Ukrainians have to decide. I know, having gone there, that they very much believe that their territory should be respected. I think we in the West should stick by the line that every country should be able to have its own sovereignty over its territory. I don't know, but I do know what it's the things that we discussed and predicted that Ukraine would massively outperform have happened. The danger scenario of massive outperformance is that your adversary is backed into a corner, whether that's...
But if he's failing and we need to find a way for him to look like he hasn't failed to his own people, what is that?
Well, we're very good at that in the U.S. We're failing at a lot of stuff, and we convince ourselves we're not. Somebody has got to be somebody who's very good at this. Like, what does a politician do for a living? I mean, I happen to be more on the left. Some people are more on the right. The job of a politician is to convince you haven't failed, and then get your vote.
You sound like Henry Kissinger, though.
So,
basically, we're going to have to give something away. But it's not ours to give.
Henry, I discussed this with him. He believes that my belief is the Ukrainians decide, but you need someone who's not me. Like, I'm not adept. My job is to actually deliver something that works and win. There are people whose whole professions are to help you explain to your people why it wasn't a failure. I don't do that for a living, but I do.
So I thought that part at the end is really funny because he's like, hey, I actually build products so you can, have the politicians that do all the talking end up figuring out how to tell Putin that he won even though he didn't win. So I think there's a couple points from that are really important. Number one, Palantir software is being used in Ukraine, and it's being used in Ukraine in a really significant way. Again, I did a video on Daily Palantir a couple of days ago. I'll link that in the description as well. In one of the chapters in that video, we talk about a new article that discusses the targeting capabilities of Palantir software from the BBC. It seems like the Ukraine-Russia thing is not resolved yet. I hope it gets resolved soon for everyone's well-being, but Palantir software is playing a pivotal role. Number two, Karp understands Putin really well. In that conversation, he's basically like, hey, Putin's a dictator. He's not going to accept failure. So there's no way Ukraine can actually win and make it seem like they win. They have to win, protect their sovereignty, protect their territory. But we have to be able to convince Putin that he didn't lose so that he can convince his citizens that they didn't lose. Because if the citizens find out that Russia lost, that might be the end of Vladimir Putin. So from that perspective, I think Karp has a very nuanced perspective on how to understand and conceptualize the dynamics and relationships between the United States and Russia, and how someone like a narcissistic dictator that is Vladimir Putin is able to deal with the fact that Palantir software is legitimately stopping Russia from being able to win when it comes to Ukraine. And that is also the reason that I think Karp was sanctioned. Now, what does this mean for investors? Well, I think there's two things here. I think the NATO business for Palantir, meaning the amount of software they can sell to countries that are aligned with Western values, I think it's a massive TAM. I think there's hundreds of billions of dollars that exist in that market. Palantir's not going to get all that money, but I think they can get a significant portion of that money over the next 10 years. And I think as defense spending goes up, more people will recognize, hey, we should probably protect ourselves, especially if you're, Lithuania, Poland, countries on the Baltic states, where Russia could do the same thing that they did to you, that they did to Ukraine. You might want to protect yourself as well. Number two, I think it means we're investing in a company that actually has values. At the end of the day, I really don't take companies that seriously. They say one thing, they do another. When it comes to social values, I care about the bottom line economic impact, because at the end of the day, my dollars are being invested for more ROI. Do I care about how they act in certain situations? Yes. Will I always take them seriously? Probably not, because I know better than them myself. I don't think Amazon actually cares about trans people. I don't think Google actually cares about Black Lives Matter. I don't think they care about any of that stuff. I don't think they care about racism, sexism. I think they only care about the bottom line, and they use those things in advantageous moments. So from understanding that perspective, I think one of the beautiful things about investing in Palantir is they're one of the companies that is out there that might do that in certain instances, but for the most part, especially when you look at their explicit support of Israel and what they're doing with Ukraine, I have found very limited instances in which Palantir says something that they don't believe in. In fact, I can't even think of those instances. I'm just, giving a little bit of the devil's advocate because I imagine every company does that to some respect. But I have never seen them take a stance on a social issue and then kind of do something that's the opposite of it, where you could say, oh, you're a hypocrite. If Palantir stands with Israel, they stand with Israel. You could hate that or love that, but that's what they do. If they believe that Russia and China are not countries you should work with, then they don't work with Russia and China. Investors hated them for years for not being able to do that because there's a massive opportunity for data analytics in Russia and China, AI, ML, all that stuff. They foregoed that opportunity to be able to focus on Western values. So I think for investors, what it means is that the NATO business is going to be massive, and I think that's going to contribute to more governmental revenue over the next 10 years. But two, is you're investing in a company that actually has some backbone. And at least to me, that makes me feel better about my investment, and also makes me feel like I can trust the company as they go on to try to expand and take on new territories and build in different industries, because they're going to do it with the right set of values that actually matter at the end of the day. All right, that's it for me. Thank you, everybody, for coming back to Daily Palantir on a Sunday edition. I thought it was pretty funny that Karp got banned from Russia. I'm sure Karp thinks it's pretty funny as well. But just wanted to show everybody and kind of show the implications of what that means for investors at the end of the day. Thank you guys for listening and watching. I'll see you on the next one.